The theme for this month is imagination, presumably about good things that are hard to imagine. The specific topic for today is the life and legacy of Martin Luther King, who had that kind of imagination. Recently, we've been reminded that we also need to apply our imagination to unimaginably bad things that people can do, so we can be proactive. Unfortunately, that imagination was not present in the last week, or if it was ignored. I'm trying to imagine what could happen between the day this video is recorded and the day of the service. I'm apprehensive. Staying with the definition that I guess is behind today's sermon, I am inspired by the legacy of Martin Luther King, especially in his home state of Georgia. Stacey Abrams did the unimaginable. She overcame multiple obstacles and turned out to vote in Georgia twice in the last two elections, with major national consequences. Truly inspirational.
We light our chalice this morning in honor of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the generations of prophetic black leaders who offered their labors and so often their lives to the dream of a world with true liberty and justice for all. If you have a chalice with you at home, you're invited to light it at this time. May we not rest when so much is at stake. May we be bold in our witnessing to what is good and true. May we be creative in our imagining of the future to be. May we celebrate the achievements in the long march for justice as we memorialize and honor the fallen. May our liberal faith continue to guide us to a brighter future. May it be so.
We are the ones, we've been waiting. 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 We are we've been waiting. We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting. 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 We are the ones, we've been
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Community Church of Santa Monica. I'm Robert Schalkamp, your worship associate. The Reverend Jeremiah Kalendae, who serves his congregation as his developmental minister, and our team of worship associates are delighted to welcome you and to be joining you in our online sanctuary this morning. If you are new to our community, please know that while our building is closed, we are still here, and there are many ways to learn more about us and become involved. We offer a multitude of programs to serve the needs of our congregation and to be of service to the larger world, offering broad religious and personal education for youth as well as for people of all ages, in addition to serving as a pillar of community activism in Santa Monica and West Los Angeles neighborhoods. If you're interested in learning more, please join us for our virtual meetup after the service. Unitarian Universalism is not defined by creed or dogma, but is guided by principles that affirm the worth and dignity of every person and encourage an individual search for truth and meaning. We honor the wonder of existence and believe that we are all connected to each other and to the interdependent web of life. Our beliefs are drawn from scripture and science, nature and philosophy, personal experience and ancient tradition. We are an open, affirming, and welcoming congregation. We are diverse in backgrounds, social locations, gender identities, ethnicities, sexual orientations, spiritualities, and philosophies of life. We are united in our desire to create a diverse, beloved community, to live the principles of our faith, and to serve the wider world. As we begin this morning, we want to acknowledge that our church buildings and the homes of most of our members are on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the Tongva people who lived here and cared for this land for thousands of years. This land was stolen from the Tongva people by colonial settlers. We recognize and mourn the often deadly harm inflicted on the indigenous people of this country. We lift up their grace, resilience, and relationship with these sacred lands. Our Director of Religious Education, Cleo Anderson, would like to extend an invitation for people of all ages to sign up for our various classes and programs. We have many open spots for youth in our virtual RE classes and hangouts, and there are a number of lifelong learning opportunities available for people of all ages. please see our website or contact Cleo for more information. Join us after the service for our virtual coffee hour on Zoom, with a number of breakout room options with different discussion topics, conversations, and opportunities to get to know one another more deeply. Links will be posted below, as well as in our UUSM Facebook group. In these uncertain times, you may wish to consider, now more than ever, to join us today at the conclusion of this service. For more information about our activities and ways to get involved, please visit our website at uusm.org or our online newsletter at news.uusm.org. You may also want to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter on our website.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast by Thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met Thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget Thee. Shadowed beneath Thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
El amor es la enseñanza de esta iglesia.
Love is the doctrine of this church.
Buscar la verdad es su sacramento y el servicio es la oración.
The quest for truth is its sacrament and service is its prayer.
Vivir juntos en paz.
To dwell together in peace.
Buscar el conocimiento en la libertad.
To seek knowledge in freedom.
Servir a la humanidad en comunión.
to serve humankind in fellowship.
Así es como convenimos unos a otros.
Thus do we covenant with each other.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung through every land by every tongue.
Good morning. So, first things first, Lizzie has returned from her long vacation. She'll be sticking around a while, but we might sub in some other visiting backgrounds. Today, we're going to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. He has a whole holiday that's coming up. In fact, it's tomorrow. And you've probably heard a lot about him, or no, maybe you haven't. But what you've heard is probably things like he won a Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, or he gave the famous I Have a Dream speech, which essentially said that he had a dream that one day kids of all races and colors, and people of all races and colors, could live together in harmony and no one would be discriminated against. Seems pretty fair and simple of a dream. But what makes that speech so extraordinary, what makes that idea so extraordinary, is the fact that he had that dream in the 1960s. Now, during the 1960s, in lots of places, but very specifically the South, the southern part of America, there were a lot of laws and rules that discriminated against African Americans. Separate drinking fountains, having to sit at the back of the bus, and white passengers only be able to sit on the front, not being able to eat at lunch counters inside of department stores, all sorts of things. Like even schools were segregated, so only white kids could go to certain schools, and only black kids could go to certain schools. And so in the 1960s, it was kind of a big deal for this minister, this preacher, a young one at that, to say, no, we should really, build a society where we're all equal. But here's the thing. What we always focus on is the dream. We always focused on him winning a Nobel Peace Prize. What we never really dig into is the mechanism that he used to get there. And that mechanism is civil disobedience. And you're probably like, what is that? Civil disobedience essentially means, without using violence, disrupting a system that's unfair as the means to make the system fair. So, some examples of that were the bus boycotts. So, like I said, African Americans could only sit on the back of the bus. Well, we know the story of Rosa Parks. She refused to move, and it triggered a bus boycott. So for a whole year, African Americans who were mostly using the bus system stopped until they had the right to sit wherever they wanted. So for a whole year, the bus system never made any money because most of their patrons were African American, and those people were walking for miles, carpooling in cars that probably shouldn't have been on the road, but they were civilly disobedient. They marched and crossed bridges on foot, which they weren't supposed to. They held things called sit-ins, where they went to those lunch counters I was telling you about, department stores, and they would sit there. And the thing is, people didn't just kindly look at them and go, okay, they're sitting here, they're desegregating. They were yelled at, They were spat on. People would pour different food sauces on them, like mustard, and dump hot dogs on them. But it was civil disobedience. It mucked up the lunch counter's ability to make money. And that legacy lives on. Like, that civil disobedience eventually got the right to, like, have the ability to sit anywhere you want on a bus. It worked to desegregate schools. And that legacy has lived on in modern times. Like, you've probably were aware that, this past summer, America took to the streets. And there were hundreds of people sometimes blocking freeways, mucking up the system and letting people know, hey, you're irritated that you can't get to work because we're here. We're furious because certain people are being murdered simply for the color of their skin. Civil disobedience, the mucking up of systems, the disruption of the status quo is Martin Luther King's real legacy. It is the mechanism that actually made it possible for that speech, for that dream to happen, for the Nobel Peace Prize to exist. He took bodies and people and ideas and systems and played a long chess game to win over rights. And lots of people have inherited that rights, and currently we're witnessing that. And you're in a really interesting time. And so think about civil disobedience. What are things you would take to the streets for? What are things you would give up in the name of an entity or body or government making something right? Ask your family. Actually, a lot of Unitarians are very proud of the fact that they marched with Dr. Martin Luther King, so ask around, see if somebody marched with them and they can tell you stories. All in all, tomorrow, on Martin Luther King Day, celebrate his dream, celebrate his Peace Prize, but celebrate the civil disobedience, the disruption that made all of those things possible. And that's it for today. Bye.
Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part of the love you give. Open my heart to all that I seek. Let me be part of the love you give. Part of the love that I seek. Let me be part of the love. Let me be part of the love you give.
We enter into our time for mindfulness, prayer, and silent meditation. This is a time we make in each service for spiritual deepening, contemplation, and practicing spiritual disciplines together as a liberal religious community. You're invited during this time of the service to sit quietly and comfortably, perhaps light a candle if you've not already, and connect with the stillness and serenity within through an awareness of the movement of your breathing and the beating of your heart. This is a time to be present to yourself, to encounter the depths within, as you also expand your mindfulness and that great circle of compassion to embrace this community and beyond. Please join me for moments of prayer and mindfulness. Let us imagine that we are all seated in our sanctuary together this morning. You're invited to inwardly recite these words as a centering meditation. Breathing in, May my heart be open and filled with light. Breathing out, may loving kindness imbue my life. Breathing in, may your heart be open and filled with light. Breathing out, may loving kindness imbue your life. Breathing in, may our hearts be open and filled with light. Breathing out, may loving kindness imbue our lives. You are invited to continue with this centering prayer or enjoy a few minutes of silent meditation. I will ring the singing bowl to begin and end our time for silent meditation. Liberal religious faith calls us to place a deep trust in our aspirations to a better world. It asks us to commit ourselves to something larger than our individual lives. Its principles and values help to guide us as we work together as a beloved community, in touch with that spirit of love, the ground of being itself, and the web of all existence. In the religious teachings that served as the early foundation of Unitarian Universalism, we are told that faith is the substance of things hoped for, or it is our dreaming of the world as it might be, and it is the evidence of things not seen, or our knowledge of what can and must be to remain true to our liberal religious aspirations. Faith, along with hope and love, constitute the three jewels of the religious life, according to our Christian siblings, because they are dispositions towards life that help us to transcend the limitations of time and circumstance. They can help us to imagine and realize a better life for ourselves, our neighbors, and our larger society. Faith, hope, and love can sustain us through seemingly insurmountable challenges, just as they did time and time again for the generations that arrived before us. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a person of profound liberal religious faith, who taught that faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. I imagine that Dr. King's faith allowed him to consecrate his life in service to a world that was yet to be. Are we not also called as religious liberals to dream a new world into being? Let us encounter this profound religious radical this morning so that our lives might be inspired to address the challenges that remain in our day and give birth to that better world. Let us find the truth in his words in the letter from a Birmingham jail in 1963, that freedom from oppression and injustice is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Now, when I was in seminary at Starr King School for the Ministry in Berkeley, my advisor, the Reverend Dr. Dorsey Blake, was the successor to the pulpit of the Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman, who was an early civil rights leader and one of King's mentors. Each semester, Dr. Blake offered a course in which students could study the corpus of these luminaries' writings alongside the works of Mahatma Gandhi, Dorothy Day, and W.E.B. Du Bois. This was my first opportunity to encounter Dr. King through his own words and not through the popular culture image that I had embraced as a young person. It became apparent to me that he was truly a revolutionary prophet for our times, who had been sanitized, secularized, and whitewashed to make his truly radical dream for humanity something other than what it was, something that was palatable to the very society that had murdered him. Now, Dr. King was secularized to such a degree, one might think that devotion to the religious life and the prophetic traditions of the black church had minimal bearing on his worldview. He has been reduced to someone who's no longer a threat to the capitalist economic order that depends on oppressing and marginalizing huge segments of the population. He would become so narrowly defined by his work for civil rights that few would encounter him as an intersectional activist who worked at the center of a multitude of struggles for liberation. Dr. King was a true revolutionary, and it has taken many of us half a century since his assassination to begin to understand the complexity of his calling and example as a prophet of liberal religion. Dr. King was a deeply spiritual man who acted upon his liberal faith to make its impact in the world real. He was a graduate of Crosser Theological Seminary and completed his doctoral studies in theology at Boston University. His thesis was entitled "A Comparison of the Conceptions of God in the Thinking of Paul Tillich and Henry Nelson Wyman." Ordained in the Baptist tradition, like his father, the Reverend Martin Luther King Sr., he served pastorates at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, and Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. Ebenezer Baptist Church is, of course, presently the pastorate of the newly elected U.S. Senator from Georgia, the Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock. Now, King's earliest theological writings emphasize not civil rights, as many might presume, but the frailty of the human condition and the need for human beings to depend on a love divine. He thought the liberal religious assessment of the human condition was far too optimistic and naive. He wrote, "I came to see that liberalism's superficial optimism concerning human nature caused it to overlook the fact that reason is darkened by sin. The more I thought about human nature, the more I saw how our tragic inclination for sin, or we might say wrongdoing, causes us to use our minds to rationalize our actions. Liberalism failed to see that reason by itself is little more than an instrument to justify man's defensive ways of thinking. Reason, devoid of the purifying power of faith, can never free itself from the distortions and rationalizations." His antidote to this dilemma was that reason had to be purified by faith, and that faith finds its highest expression in reliance upon a love that transcends every limited thing. Love has the power to enhance faith and to properly orient our use of reason. This was the theological foundation for his calling to the work of justice in the world. Now, although Dr. King was critical of the optimism that served as the intellectual foundation of our very own tradition, he was also inspired by our commitments to liberal interpretations of religion and the work of social justice. At one point, it is reported that he and Coretta considered becoming Unitarians. Coretta had relayed in an interview years after he was murdered that they had frequented Unitarian churches when they were in Boston. She is reported to have said, "We gave a lot of thought to becoming Unitarian at one time, but Martin and I realized we could never build a mass movement of black people if we were Unitarian." So they remained committed to their Baptist roots and built a mass movement of black people from the black prophetic church traditions. It's sad to consider that the potential of our own liberal religious movement was limited by it being so ensconced in a culture of whiteness. It is no surprise that we are still grappling with dismantling white supremacy culture all of these decades later. The whitewashing of his prophetic message in the modern day is perhaps most evident in the erasure of his broad analysis of society's problems and the radicalism of the solutions he proposed. Now, the average American may only be familiar with his famed "I Have a Dream" speech and his aspirations to a universal brotherhood and sisterhood. The historical amnesia of white supremacist culture does not want us to remember that Dr. King was an intersectional spiritual activist. Now, intersectionality is an analytical framework that considers relationships of various systems of oppression and the relationships of the struggles for liberation in our society. King was not only concerned with the welfare of people of color, but of the welfare of poor people, women, laborers, soldiers, and so many other marginalized people in our society. In his 1967 address to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, "Where Do We Go From Here?" he emphasizes that white Americans must recognize that justice for black people cannot be achieved without radical changes in the structure of society. And in 1969's A Testament of Hope, he expounds the Black Revolution is forcing America to face all of its interrelated flaws: racism, poverty, militarism, and materialism. It is exposing evils that are rooted in the whole structure of society. It reveals systemic rather than superficial flaws and suggests that radical reconstruction of society itself is the real issue to be faced. A radical reconstruction of society itself. Now, he denounced the Vietnam War and militarism in general, advocated for women's rights like access to contraception, fought for access to health care, supported the labor movement, and relentlessly critiqued nationalism and capitalism. He thought systematically and came to understand that the forces of oppression in society are not isolated realities, but they are interrelated and reinforce each other. A true revolution required a counter-oppressive, intersectional analysis that made these interlocking oppressions apparent so that they could be dismantled. In his eulogy for the martyred children in 1963, he wrote, "We must be concerned not merely about who murdered them," and we should listen to this in our day, but about the system, the way of life, and the philosophy which produced the murderers. And in considering poverty, he asked the question, why are there 40 million poor people in America? And when you begin to ask that question, you are raising questions about the economic system, about a broader distribution of wealth. When you ask that question, you begin to question the capitalist economy. Elsewhere, he admonishes, "Again, we have deluded ourselves into believing the myth that capitalism grew and prospered out of the Protestant work ethic of hard work and sacrifice. The fact is that capitalism was built on the exploitation and suffering of black slaves and continues to thrive on the exploitation of the poor, both black and white, both here and abroad. The evils of capitalism are as real as the evils of militarism and the evils of racism." He foresaw the dawning of the capitalist corporate state. He warned us that we may have created a monster that may be impervious to a structural revolution. He wrote, "We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. When machines and computers, profit motives and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. And we must work out programs," he said, "of massive, active, non-violent resistance to the evils of modern corporate society." Dr. King imagines the world to be. "I do not think of political power as an end, nor do I think of economic power as an end. They are ingredients in the objective that we seek in life, and I think that end of that objective is a truly familial society, the creation of the beloved community." The beloved community for him was a community of reconciliation and redemption. It was not a world without conflict, but a world in which conflict was dealt with non-violently in the spirit of love. It was a world at peace with itself, a world where all people recognized each other as siblings. Dr. King leaves us with this question. So the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists we will be. Will we be extremists for hate or extremists for love? Will we be extremists for the preservation of injustice or for the extension of justice? If we are to be extremists for love, he cautions us. Our only hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and to go out into a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal hostility to poverty, racism, and militarism. May the beloved community we create together here illumine our hearts and minds and give us all courage for the days ahead. Amen, and blessed be.
We are a community that works for more than ourselves. Today we pledge 50% of our offering to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The very beginnings of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, also known as SCLC, can be traced back to the Montgomery bus boycott. In the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the SCLC is renewing its commitment to bring about the promise of one nation under God, indivisible, together with the commitment to activate the strength of love within the community of humankind. Their programs feed the homeless, provide nonviolence training, heighten awareness of human trafficking, and more. Thank you for your generous support. Half of our offering this morning will go to the SCLC, so please give generously. We also encourage you to give to the general fund for our church. We are not worshiping in our building, nor can any of the rooms on our campus be used by the many groups that have met there for years. So if you're able, and we know some of you are not, please give. Thank you for your generous support. There are 3 ways to give: over text, through our website, or by mailing a check. Using your smartphone, text 844-982-0209 with the donation amount and the code for where the funds will be posted. A brief registration form will be sent to you if this is your first time giving in this manner, but it is very simple each time afterwards. To make a generous congregation contribution, use code GCC or use the code QR that you see on your screen. On our website, you can make a one-time donation or set up recurring payments for your pledge or another purpose. Your giving makes a big difference.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours, it will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, it will be sure, it will be sure. Oh, glory, glory, glory. Oh,
to the heavens, no man, no weapon formed against, yes, glory is destined. Every day women and men become legends. Sins that go against our skin become blessings. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom is like religion to us. Justice is juxtaposition in us. Justice for all just ain't specific enough. One son died, his spirit is revisiting us. True and living in us. Resistance is us. That's why Rosa sat on the bus. That's why we walk through Ferguson with our hands up. When it go down, we woman and man up. They say stay down, and we stand up. Shots, we on the ground. The camera panned up. King pointed to the mountaintop, and we ran up.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be us. It will be us. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Glory, glory, glory.
Now the war is not over, victory isn't won, but we'll fight on to the finish, and then when it's all done, we'll cry glory,
Glory,
oh glory,
glory,
oh,
glory.
Selma is now for every man, woman, and child. Even Jesus got his crown in front of a crowd. They march with the torch, we gon' run with it now. Never look back, we done gone hundreds of miles. From dark roads, he rose to become a hero. Facing a league of justice, his power was the people. Enemy is lethal, the king became regal. Saw the face of Jim Crow under a bald eagle. The biggest weapon is to stay peaceful. We sing, our music is the cuts that we bleed through. Somewhere in the dream we had an epiphany. Now we right the wrongs in history. No one can win the war individually. It takes the wisdom of the elders and young people's energy. Welcome to the story we call victory. The coming of the Lord, my eyes have seen the glory.
One day, when the glory comes, it'll be us. It'll be us. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure.
oh, one day, hey,
Glory,
one day there will be glory,
glory,
oh,
glory,
glory.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall all be free someday. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall live in peace someday.
Let us listen to the wisdom of prophetic leadership and find the courage to be changed by its example. Let us hold fast to the stories of struggle and resistance and find our place in them in our day. Let us proceed into the future with humility, acknowledging all that has come before and all that may be. In this way, may you be blessed, and may you be a blessing. Amen.